Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones, and this is part 3 of Searches in Accordance, Basic to Intermediate. I'm teaching this in 7 sessions, and I am starting from the ground up in how to search accordance, regardless of whether you're on Mac or Windows or version 14, 13, 12, 11 on down. Everything that we're talking about here should work in all of those versions. This is part 3, basic to intermediate, starting from the ground up, working our way up to what I would consider intermediate level searches. And we do have more advanced searching help files and occasional webinars available, but we're going to start from the very beginning today with a review of parts 1 and 2. We'll go over that so that if you weren't here, you can still have that content and that information. If you were here, hopefully that's a helpful review. And then today we're going to move into some new material. I'll talk about the difference between connecting commands and standalone commands. And I'll explain why that's important and how those work. And then today, we're going to talk about 2 standalone commands, range and count. And then as this webinar series progresses, there will be more commands to look at. We'll preview some of those today, and should be plenty of time for questions along the way. If you've got questions, you can use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. That's how we can communicate with each other. That's like a one-way typed chat. So type a question or comment in there that comes to me, and I'll respond either privately or out loud with everyone. And this handout that you're showing on your screen that you should be seeing from my screen share is also available to you. That's in the GoToWebinar control panel, where the questions box is. There's a section that says handouts. Just make sure the arrow is pointing down so that you can access this PDF. If you're registered, we'll also send you a link to the recording today and the handout. And if you're watching this on the recording after the fact and would like access to the handout, just email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com. abramkj@accordancebible.com. We don't have our handouts currently posted with our platform where we have the webinar recording. So that's the easiest way to get that, is by emailing me if you want it. All right, that said, let's talk about what we're doing today. I mentioned already that this is all about searching words, searching verses, phrases, and more in accordance. This is the 3rd session where we're going to briefly review the last 2 sessions and then talk about range and count commands. Let me expand this so it's a little bit easier to read here. I included up at the top some links that I think will be useful to you. These are going to be in every session, but I want to have them here anyway. Accordance help files would be the first one. This is my top most accessed support resource in Accordance. I use this myself when I'm preparing for webinars or when I'm doing a study and I've forgotten how to do something. These are wonderfully written and thorough. accordancebible.com/help-for-accordance. So you can open that up, and that will give you, you can choose between, platforms and versions. Another way to get your help files is in Accordance. If you just go to the help menu up at the top and then click on Accordance Help, it will take you to the appropriate platform. So this is for Mac, and version 13 is what I'm using today. So it will automatically open to the proper help files in your app. You may wish to do that from the help menu, Accordance Help. However, I list the web URL here because I have accessed these help files on a phone or an iPad where I didn't have the full desktop app available to me. So everything is always there. The Accordance forums are linked here as well. If you have a question or comment, or you're interested in getting updates or whatever, you can go there. I won't walk folks through that. You can click on that, and if you're not already registered, you can register for a free account and then interact there. But that's a great place to go, especially when you move beyond what I would consider basic and intermediate searches, or even within those searches. You can go to the forums and say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. What's the best way I can do it, or what are some options? And we've got an international base of users that are available pretty much around the clock, at least in theory. So you may get an answer pretty quickly. And then there's also this getting started with accordance module that I've linked to. That's another very good bite-sized kind of written set of trainings. You can think of it that way. So lots of help in accordance, and that is up here in the help menu. There's much more here: webinars, videos, tutorials, and the like. So just depending on what you find most useful, there's something for you to access. I've also linked to part 1 of this series and part 2. So those recordings are up already. So if you follow the link in the handout, you'll get there. You may have to register again or register for the first time, but that's just a one-time thing, and then you'll get in and be able to access that. All right, let's do a little bit of review. We started in part 1 with an introduction to searching. We talked about the search entry area or search entry box, which is where a lot of things start in accordance. Not everything. You can open up a book from your library and just browse it and never search anything, but in accordance, fundamentally, searching, it's kind of built around searching a primary text. So if you go to File, in accordance, and New Workspace, what you will see is your default search text, which you can change in your preferences, and you'll get a flashing cursor, which means that without you even selecting it, your cursor is already there. So you could just start typing any word and run the search. That's the search entry area, and we've talked about the different ways to use that you can search by words. We talked about flex searching and the difference between the more exact letter by letter search of words and flex searches. We talked about searching by verses. We talked briefly about searching by headings. That's I wouldn't say it's a new addition to Accordance, but it's within the last couple years, and so this is a very specific. It may be a good way to do a topical search. You just want to see, the big bold passage headings that you might have in a print Bible. You can search those separately, and Accordance has them separated out because they are not technically part of the surface text, part of the biblical text per se. And so that's why that's there as a separate heading. So when you're searching for words, whether that's by words or flex, you're searching just the Bible text itself, not the headings, but you could choose to search the headings separately. And we talked about verse searches, how you can search a range. We'll talk more about ranges today, but you could also do something non-contiguous passages. So maybe you want to see how all the Gospels begin. You could do something like this, and Accordance will show them all to you. I'm showing the headings in these search results. You can turn that off in your settings. So a lot of what you're seeing here, even that is customizable. But we talked about the use case where maybe you're reading an electronic book or on a website or something where you just get a string of references, and you can just copy and paste them from that app or that source straight into the search entry area and get all the verses all at once. So that was our introduction to searching, and we talked about verses, we talked about the context slider and the different ways to search by words, and we started to talk about searching by phrases in that first session too. Then in part 2, last week, we started moving into search commands, and where you can find search commands, I'll show you this now because we'll need it today as well, is right-click from the search entry area and enter command. This is where you will find a whole set of search commands, and we went over a number of these, not all of them, but we did and. We spent a lot of time on followed by, preceded by, within, and so right-click, enter command is how you get there. You may remember that there's a search menu up at the top, and so you can enter a command through that. You'll also see keyboard shortcuts. So whatever the keyboard shortcut is will show up. You can do that. And we saw that there's this quick entry feature where if I'm typing Abraham and Sarah, I can get the command here, which tells Accordance that I'm searching for a connecting command, not the word AND. And so here what I get, we talked about this last time, is not the phrase Abraham and Sarah. That would be if I searched Abraham and Sarah without the pointy brackets. You see that? that comes up there. But Abraham and Sarah shows me where they occur in the same verse. And so that connecting command, and I could get either, again, from enter command and here, search, enter command, same menu, and then there's the keyboard shortcut, and then you can just start typing. So multiple ways to do the same thing. You don't have to know all of them. If you use Accordance long enough, you eventually will, but just find one that works for you. For me, I prefer just typing, and then I'm just hitting the arrow key here, and I'm not having to navigate search menus, and I was able to run that search very quickly. We also talked last time about the scope search condition, and let me just spend a moment reviewing that again. We'll be looking in the same area more today, but it's easy to miss that in Accordance there is a plus button at the right of the search entry area, the search entry box. So if we go to that and hover over it, we see that we can add a search condition, range, scope, etc. So if I hit the plus button, now I can add we'll talk about range today actually in depth, but we can add scope. And by default, my scope is set to verse. So last time when we were searching Abraham and Sarah with the scope set to verse, it showed me every time the word Abraham and the word Sarah occur in the same verse. And I used the example of how Hebrews 11 is absent from this, maybe conspicuously so if you were expecting to see that. However, the results are accurate. The word Abraham and the word Sarah do not occur in the same verse in Hebrews 11, but if we change the search scope to chapter, now we're telling Accordance, search for the word Abraham and the word Sarah across a chapter of text. Hit enter, and we'll still see instances where it occurs in the same verse, of course, but as we scroll down, or we could use this go-to box, sure enough, there's Hebrews. And none of these instances have it in the same verse, but it's in the same chapter. So we got Abraham and Sarah in the same chapter, and that alerted us to the fact that they're mentioned in Hebrews 11. So we just had to play with that a little bit. We also talked about how you could do the search scope to be clause, sentence, paragraph, or even book. Again, we're going to come back to this search condition, which we can close here if we want to simplify things, but we're going to come back to adding a search condition today when we talk about range. We're going to do that in depth. But we also talked about some of these connecting commands last time, or followed by, preceded by. We talked about the within command, and then we wrapped up with some time spent on the wildcard character. There are multiple search characters you could use. These are under enter symbol, by the way, and I suspect we will, I don't suspect, I know that as the series progresses, we'll go more into these. So there are symbols you can use, but the wildcard, the asterisk, is one that we used as well. We talked about the challenge here with these names where they were changed. We looked at Paul and Saul too, and how you search that. It's actually quite simple in Paul and Saul's case. You just do asterisk AUL, which will give you all words that end in AUL regardless of how they start. Now we of course have another Saul here, but if we were looking for the New Testament Saul, Paul, we could just skip ahead here to Acts and start our search there. That's an overview in about 10 minutes of what we spent the last 2 hours on. And again, these full recordings are here if you want to go into any more detail on that. But let me check in with you and see if you've got comments or questions about anything that we've looked at so far. We also talked about the field command last time, which we'll circle back to in another session, but that was how you could find what verses start with this word. We spent some time on that. There was a great comment about that, so we looked at that. But what questions do you have as we get going, if any? Otherwise, we'll dive in. All right. Well, I welcome questions at any time, and I will respond to all of them as I'm able, either privately or publicly. Let's move into search commands in general. There are connecting commands and there are standalone commands. And you can see this in accordance. Let me just get to a new workspace here. When you right click and go to enter command, notice that there's a faint gray dividing line in this pop-up menu or this dialog here. And that's on purpose. If you have struggled to figure out the logic of this, or still don't know, or maybe don't care, the explanation is simply that the top set of commands are connecting commands, and then the bottom set of commands are standalone commands. And what that means is just what it says. The connecting commands connect words together, or they could connect some combination of words and characters, but just as their name suggests, they connect things. And that's really where we were focusing last time, is followed by as a connecting command. You have to have an expression before it and after it, connected by the command itself for it to work in accordance. That's a connecting command. Today, and for the next few sessions, we're going to go more in depth on the standalone commands. And this is where I would say, and a thing's difficulty is pretty subjective, but I would say these connecting commands, they're more basic searches, something you might learn early on in your accordance usage. These standalone commands, I think, start to get a little more advanced. They're certainly not, I don't think they're immediately intuitive without some explanation. And so we're gonna spend some time talking now about these connecting commands. I'm sorry, these standalone commands, the second half here, which I think moves us into more intermediate territory probably. So there's the link command, contents, hits, infer, which is super fun, probably more advanced than any of these. Well, that would be merge. But then fuzzy, range, count, key, text, topic, style, field. We did do the field command last time. We previewed that. So let's start with two of them, the range command and the count command. We'll just do one at a time, starting with the range command. And this is from that getting started with accordance module. Let me show you that module, by the way. Let's see here, go to window, library, getting started with accordance. And I linked to this in your handout. If you want to see this module, let me just show you this briefly. I don't think I've shown this yet. It's pretty simple. I mean, it really consists of the workspace, which has a lot of stuff, organizing your library, zones and tabs, triple clicking instant details, and the search tab, which is really where we are for the bulk of this series. But this is from the help files. It's just kind of organized as an accordance module. It's searchable like a module is, but this is a great resource. And this is where I'm getting this information here, which is also in the help file. So from the range command section here, and you'll see all of these that we saw. Let's just compare the order. Right click, enter command. So we had link, contents, hits, infer. It's in the same order, so it's all here. We're looking at the range command today. It lets you create a temporary range. For example, love range 1JO through 3JO, which is the example we'll use, would find all occurrences of the word love in 1 John through 3 John. So that is the range command, and then there are two ways to define a range. One is in the in the search entry area itself. And this is maybe easiest. This is all in your handout, but I'm gonna go off handout for just a moment. Let's get a text. All right, so we want to find, and let's just say we want to find love in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Well, we know that that's a word search. We also know that accordance is smart enough to automatically change the search token if I forget through quick entry. So love. And now what I need to do, if I just hit enter, I'm going to see LOVE all throughout the Bible. And this is an exact search, not a flex search, because I'm searching by word. So LOVE. We know that I could use the go to box and skip ahead to 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. That's fine. But I can also make this a little bit easier, more efficient by using the range command. And there are two ways to do it. The first way is, it's actually the second one in the handout. And this is a temporary range. It's nothing you save. It's just you use it once, and then as soon as you change what's in the search entry area, it's gone. But we go to right click, enter command and range, or as we saw before, search, enter command range, got the keyboard shortcut, or we could bypass all of that and just start typing RA. And Accordance gives me some words that start with RA, but it also gives me the command, and I'm going to select that. Now it's got a question mark with a faint accent color highlighting it that's inviting me to give a range. So where do you want to search love? Well, I want to search it in 1 John through, let's say, 3 John. And remember from our searching before, Accordance will recognize anything close to the book abbreviation as long as it differentiates it from other books. So 1JO through 3JO, I suppose you could have done JOH or JOHN, but Accordance finds it either way. And now what I've got in my search is LOVE every time it occurs in 1 John, 2 John, 3 John. Interestingly, it does not occur in 1 John. If we were worried about the range, we could just duplicate the tab, which I'll do Command D or Control D on Windows, and we could just double check that. Is it really not in 1 John? Oh, I'm sorry, it is. I was misreading the chapter numbers. My apologies. Yeah, it is in 1 John 2. It's not in 1 John 1. That's what I meant to search. So range 1 John 1, it's not in 1 John 1, just that first chapter. Sorry about that. So it has run the search correctly, and it has given you 1 John 2, 1 John 3, 1 John 4, 2 John, and 3 John, and we could advance between these 3 books here. So that's a very easy way to do a range search. Love in range 1 John through 3 John. We might say we want to look at love in the Gospels. And so I'm just going to delete all this and start again, love, and range, R-A-N-G-E, and then we could do Matthew through John. And same thing, I get Matthew in here, Mark, Luke, and John. It's all, everything that has a hit will show up in the go-to box, so I could also advance that way. The reason you would want to do this search is that, especially with a word like love, you may want to see it in the whole Bible, but that's 492 hits. And you may just be preaching on a portion of Scripture or just want to look at a portion of Scripture. And again, the go-to box allows you to do that, but Accordance really, at a very fine-tuned level, wants to make things easier for us. So even though I can go to this go-to box and find my way to Matthew, you can also do just the range Matthew through John or whatever you want your range to be. And now you've got just those hits. It also tells you how many times love occurs in the Gospels, 56 times. So that's the quickest way to do a range search, to search a word or a phrase over a portion of text. There's another way to do that, and that's a more permanent definition of range, and that's using the scope command. So we'll do this, and then we'll use a couple examples to make sure we're on the same page with this. But I'm going to go to, actually, let me run, let's do love, range 1 John through 3 John. All right, 42 hits. We're going to just leave this here, and I'm going to right-click and duplicate tab, or you could use the keyboard shortcut. And I'm going to put these right next to each other so we can see them both. The results are going to be the same, but there's a different way to build it here, and I'll talk about why you might want this way. Back to this plus search condition. Now we know about scope. We talked about that last time. Here is range. And right now, the range is defaulting to all text. So I'm gonna, if I hit enter, actually, I don't want the range up there. If I hit enter for love, it's gonna be those 492 hits, 42 of which are in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. But you'll notice there's a little arrow here, which means I can change what the range is. I've got some defined ranges already saved in my Accordance, but let's pretend you don't have any, and you may have these ones, you may have more, but let's say this is the first time you've ever used a range, and there, I don't remember what comes pre-installed, but what you'll want to do is go to define range. And what that's going to do is that's going to give you a range that is essentially saved there within your accordance. And so go to define range. And now what I'm seeing is my already defined ranges. It opened to the top one, but I want a new one. So I'm going to go to new, and it's wanting me to name it. So I'll call it John's letters. Now it's wanting me to define it. And it gives an example here, Gen through Mal, so Genesis through Malachi. And then you need to verify it to make sure that it will actually run the search before you save it. So I'm going to do just what I did right here, 1JO through 3JO. Those are John's letters. We'll come back to the Gospel of John and Revelation, but you might even just name it 1 through 3 John. I mean, name it whatever you want to. This is up to you. What's not as up to you is the definition, because this needs to be something that Accordance can actually run a search on based on the book titles. And verify will tell you if you've done that correctly. So I'm going to go to verify, and it looks like it worked because this grayed out. If I did something like, if I just type my name in here, there's not a book named Abram. So if you get, even if you spell it wrong or do a dash in the wrong place, it will tell you. So this is good. It's sort of a way to make sure that what you're saving will actually work. So I need to go back and resave this. So verify 1JO through 3JO, or we could even just do the full name. So it verified because that turned gray. And you can tell it what book order to use. It's defaulting to my default text, which is good. And go to update. And now when that grays out, you're all set. So we're going to go to John's letters. Let's just close this and start again. So here's the search condition plus range and John's letters. And now I'm going to hit enter. And expectedly, my results are identical to what they are in the window on the left. I've just run the search in a different way. And now I've got John's letters saved here all the time. It's not like it's that hard to type in range 1 John through 3 John whenever you need it, but there is value in having it saved. We'll talk more about maybe some of the other benefits as we go, but you've got a cleaner search entry area as well here. So you don't have to worry about another command. And this, it may also make us feel freer to build other compound searches as we started to do at the end of last time. So I've got my range here for John's letters. This is also helpful for, if you want to build something a little bit more complicated, like Paul's letters or letters attributed to Paul. That would take actually kind of a long time to type out in the range. I mean, first of all, I'd need to decide, okay, what letters do I think Paul wrote, or what letters are, do scholars attribute to Paul or whatever. And so let's just say, I mean, this is not true, but let's say there's no disagreement about authorship. We're just going to go with the kind of classic attribution. We need to look at contents of the New Testament and make sure we had them all, and are they contiguous, and we'd have to, I mean, that's a lot to do here. However, if you go to range, you can actually define that range yourself, or you could do something like the epistles. So this range command really does save some time in the long run. Let's do a range definition here. Actually, here, this is interesting too. This was easy enough, Romans through Jude, in this case for epistles. Although that will include Hebrews, which the scholarly consensus still is that it was not Paul. So again, you'd want to think about that. But the place to do that, I think, really, I mean, you can do it here, but I think it's easier in this define range area. But let's build on our search that we had. Let's do all of John's literature. Now, the easy way here is to search John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation. If I just get, let's just get a list of the New Testament books here. And here's an easy way to do that. If you're ever wondering, just open a search tab and go to the go-to box without having run a search. So we've got John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and Revelation. So these are not contiguous. So what we could not do is John through Revelation if we wanted to search John's use of a certain word, because that would include words that would include books that he did not write. And it's the same with Paul. You've got Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, on and on. But this Hebrews here, and James and Peter and John, not Paul. So you want to account for that. However, even the simple, quick way of doing the range allows us to search non-contiguous books all at once. And I've put the syntax in your handout, and it's just separated by commas. So I'm going to go to love, and then R-A-N-G-E, and I'm going to type in John, 1 John through 3 John, all separated by commas, and Revelation. So what this will do is show me LOVE wherever it occurs in John, 1st John through 3rd John, and Revelation, and not the intervening books. Let's make sure that's right. I could scroll down and check. I could also save some time and go to the go to box, and sure enough, I only get love where it occurs in John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and Revelation. So even that simpler way of doing the range command is powerful. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be arranged like books that actually are right next to each other. So that's great. And there you go. There's the search. But we could also define this as a range and just keep it there as Johannine literature that John wrote. And so I'm going to duplicate this tab again. We're going to keep this search run, and now we're going to look at the other way. Remember from the handout, there is the just kind of running it in the search entry area, and then there's also defining a permanent range. So I'm going to go to the plus button now. Here's my search all ready to run. Remember, it's in black when it hasn't been run yet. It's in gray when it has been run. And I'm going to go to plus range. Now I already have this defined, but let's pretend I don't. Actually, let's just delete it. Go to define range, because you can delete something. So I'm going to delete that. All right, update. And now it's gone. So I define range. All right, so Johannine, or just John's writings, or all John. So you can call it what you want. It's just whatever's going to be easy for you to remember. And now I'm going to define it. And we're going to take this same syntax here, but we need to verify it to make sure it works. Well, actually, we don't really need to verify it because we saw that it worked. But we'll do it anyway because it will want us to. So 1st John through 3 John, Revelation, verify. Now, if we don't get a pop-up warning, then we're all set. And if this turns to gray, we're all set. All right, there we go. And it put it up there, update. And now we've got range all John. Now, before I run this search, what we should expect to see is exactly the same results as in here. This is just 2 ways to do the same thing. And sure enough, the same results are there. 2 ways to do the same thing, but now you've got a saved range. There are other ranges you could save, like wisdom. And if you want to see what some of these are, let's say you already have some and you forgot you put them in there, or you're not sure, just go to define range and look at it. Wisdom is Job through Song. Prophets is Isaiah through Malachi. History is Joshua through Esther. New Testament, Matthew through Revelation, so on and so forth. So you've got different ranges here, and you could be creative with this. It may be that you are writing a dissertation comparing Isaiah and Micah and Jeremiah or something like that. Then that could be your range that you create, is my books or something like that. And you could save that there as a permanent range that you use to draw on. All right, let me stop there on ranges and see what comments or questions you have, or especially if you've got any ways that you use the range command that you want to share. Just type that into the chat. and I'll be happy to respond. Yeah, here's, okay, let me respond to this. Let me put this in the chat for everyone to see. Yeah, I think this came in a little while ago, but somebody says defined ranges are permanent while entry using the range command search or the search entry area are temporary. Temporary versus permanent range affects the display of the analytics hits graph display. Temporary shows Genesis to Revelation, even though range restricted the search. Yep, if one uses a permanent range, then the x-axis displays only the set range. Yeah, thank you for that. We'll probably come back to analytics again, and so I'll revisit that later on. But thanks for sharing that comment. In fact, I don't think we did analytics at all the last time we did this series, so that is something I'd like to fold in this time. So we'll take a look at that more down the road. Any other comments or questions about the range command? And then we'll move on to the count command. Oh, right, good. Here's a comment on predefined ranges that you can access so you don't have to type them all in yourself. I think the best place to do that still is right here, Accordance Exchange. That's under the help files, and it's got somewhere in there a set of ranges. You may need to Command F or Control F, search the page. But they at least used to be in there, but that's where you would go to find ranges. And I'm not, actually you can user, it would be in here somewhere. I'm not going to spend the time looking through this now, but browse your way through. I don't remember what category it's under, maybe under highlights. Yeah, it is. It's under highlights. Here, let me put this link right into the chat so that you've got it directly. This will take you to some pre-saved search ranges, and this is well worth your time. And then if you don't like it, I mean, if you don't need all of them, you can delete them, but this certainly saves you time with having to define the different ranges. And then if there are ones that are not included there, you can do that. So that's in this Accordance Exchange, which is basically a set of user uploaded modules and tools and highlights and things like that. So that would be well worth checking out. Somebody asked how to access the replay. If you're asking about today's replay, if you're here, you are registered, and so it will just hit your inbox in the next few hours. If you're watching this on a recording, then you're already accessing the replay. So I think that covers everybody. Yeah, if you're here now, the only way I think you can get here is by already being registered. So we'll email everyone who's registered. Okay. Oh, good. I see. I've just now seen people pointing me to the highlights tab. Yep. So that's where to go for the ranges. Yeah, and I, not to belabor this, but just to kind of walk you through. I mean, what you would do here is go to search ranges. Read through the difference between these two, but then you download a zip file and it's going to download to your computer. I won't do this now, but you double click it open and it should just put itself right into place. And then what will happen is it will be right there in the range section. All right, so those are ranges. They're I think really good to just experiment with. And if you don't have a use case in mind, then now you know how to use them for when you do need them. There's so much in Accordance. And I think for me, the stuff I've learned the best is the stuff that I've used and that I've had a need to use. I think it was this time last year, I was teaching a multiple part series on children and children in the Bible, children in the Gospels, and how does Jesus talk about them? How does Genesis talk about them, and so on. I was using the range command constantly for that, and that was not very hard. That was simply something like CHILD asterisk range Matthew through John, and that simple search was a starting point for me for research. So I use this constantly, but again, if you don't, bookmark this for when you need it, and just know that there are these two different ways to define a range. All right, let's talk about the count command. This is also fun. This is fun, I think, for trivia purposes, maybe. Like, did you know all the words that occur only one time in the Bible? But it's also really helpful for learning vocabulary. One of the ways that you'll see in Greek and Hebrew textbooks, especially if you use like the Zondervan ones I learned on, Mounce for Greek and Pratico and Van Pelt for Hebrew. And their approach, as with many grammarians, is to say, all right, if you're reading through a text and you need to memorize some words, obviously start with the words that occur the most, and then you'll be more likely to understand the text. There's some interesting statistics here, and I'll take just a moment to show you this, because this is kind of the why, I think, for a lot of us behind the count command. So in Mounce, I'm just going to search the word frequency and see if I can get my way here quickly. All right. Yeah, here it is. It's right here. He's talking about vocabulary and his approach to vocabulary. And he says there are 5,423 different words in the New Testament that occur a total of 137 times. In other words, that's the number of word occurrences, like the word count. If you were to put it in a Pages document and say word count, that's what you would get. But it's this many unique words, which is a lot to learn. So he says after every vocabulary section, students are told what percentage of the total word count they now know. By the 8th chapter, the student will recognize more than 1 out of every 2 word occurrences, which is wonderful. So you have not learned 2,700 odd words after 8 chapters, but you have learned some 70,000 or so word occurrences, and it's done by starting with the most frequently occurring words. So if you know the word Kai, for example, we can just scroll ahead to his first vocabulary section here, which I think is at the end of chapter 4. Kai, that's 9,000 words. So that's a huge chunk right there. So that's the approach, that's the strategy. He's got more statistics here. Only 5.8% of the total number of words occur 50 times or more. And anyway, he talks more about the strategy, but basically you learn all of this vocab and you've got 80% of the Greek New Testament, which is super encouraging. And just Kai alone, you know 6.6% of the words in the Greek New Testament. So you can follow a grammar or an existing list to learn vocabulary, which would be my recommendation. There's already so many good lists out there. Take your favorite Greek grammar and learn from it. You could even go to section and type in, maybe you need titles, type in vocabulary, and you can navigate through all of the vocabulary sections all at once in accordance and learn it that way. So that's great. As you do that, or maybe after you've done that and you want to review, the count command is going to allow you to see this stuff for yourself. And I am, without knowing firsthand, I'd say I'm about 98% confident that Dr. Mounce was using the count command to get some of this information, among other commands he used. In fact, he mentions accordance. I just saw a footnote. Much of the work, especially the exercises, could not have been done without accordance. Frequency numbers come from the software program Accordance. There you go. All right, so let's talk about the count command, and we're going to use vocabulary. Again, there's some nice trivia you could do here. Maybe your New Year's resolution is learn all of the words that occur only one time in the Bible or something like that. So you can do that, and let's start with that, even if that's nobody's goal. Let's start with that. What are all of the words that occur just one time? And maybe you're just wanting to look at some interesting vocabulary. And I am going to go to Greek for this. I hope that's all right. Even if you don't know Greek, what I'm showing you here will work in other languages. All of these commands, in fact, maybe this is good for us to see that what we have been doing in English works in other languages. So remember, these are standalone commands now. So I don't need a word here. In fact, I'm not looking for a word per se. Those were connecting commands or just word searches, but I'm going to go to right click, enter command, and count. You also know by now, search, enter command, count, keyboard shortcut right here, and COUNT. It doesn't know whether I'm searching for a Greek word or a command, but here's the command. And now I get that question mark with an accent color highlighting it, same as with the range. It's saying in your standalone command, now you've got the command entered. What do you want to do? What range do you want to search? What count do you want to search? And if I just hit the number 1 and hit enter, now what I've got is 1,940 words in the Greek New Testament that occur only one time. Some of these are names in the genealogy of Matthew. That may not surprise us. So count 1 words that occur just one time in the Greek New Testament. That's it. Very easy to do. A perhaps more practical, not that that's not practical, but maybe a search people are more likely to use would be something with frequency ranges. And this gets us into that approach that Mounts and others use. And so maybe you say, all right, I want to learn all of the words. Let's just start with 500 times and more in accordance. I want to learn all of the Greek words that are used 500 times or more. There may not be very many, but let's go to the count command again. So COUNT, or all of the other ways. Now, if I type in count 500, Accordance reads that as show me all the words that occur 500 times. And in fact, there are no words that occur exactly 500 times in the Greek New Testament, and it tells me that. So I've obviously not filled out the syntax correctly of the search, because there's got to be, I just saw that Kai occurred however many times. So what you need to make sure you're doing is either using a plus or a minus or a range. So you can either do 1 to 500. So show me all of the words that occur between 1 and 500 times, which is to say, show me all the words. Let me duplicate this tab and move it over here. We'll run it another way. Show me all the words that occur 500 times or fewer. You can even just do 500 minus, and that will be inclusive of 500, although in this case it doesn't matter because there are no hits, things that occur 500 times. So whether we did 1 to 500 or 500 minus, we got the same results. So let's just take one of these. And actually, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do 500 plus. Let's do 500 plus. All right. So I've got 75,091 words. So that's a little bit more than half of the words that occur in the Greek New Testament. And I think this is what Mounts was saying. By the time you get to the end of chapter 8, you'll have about 1 out of every 2. So words that occur 500 times or more. Now, this is a useful enough search already. I can see Iesu, Christou from Jesus and Christos occur 500 times or more. Ton from the article ha, de, which can mean but or and. And maybe this is a useful list as I scroll through and look at the different verses, but where this really gets useful is where we start to use, we'll get a little bit into analytics for this now, but where we go to, let's do something like under word count totals, let's go to analysis. So we'll get more into these analytics as we go, and I know there was that comment about them with the range command, and I'll come back to that. But under word count totals, let's go to analysis for now. And it's basically giving me some stats here. Total number of verses, 7,942, which was shown here. Total number of words, 75,091, which is also shown here, right next to that analysis button. And then I've got a list here alphabetically of the words with their frequency count. And that's where that gets especially useful. And I could even, you can make the font bigger, you can adjust all the size of this. What I most want to do if I'm learning vocabulary, again, if my goal is 500 times and more, I'm going to go to sort and count down because I want the highest number first. And this tells me 44 different forms. So I've got 44, in this case, it's the lexical form, 44 different vocabulary words to learn, and that's doable. And then I've got 75,000 words of the Greek New Testament learned. Now, this will still not make for a smooth reading experience, but it's a great start. So then it's got the word, it's got a translation equivalent or a definition, and then a frequency count. So ha, 19,000 plus, kai, autas, su, de, en, ego, emi, lego, and so forth. So here's a list of all of the words. There's something a little bit errant down here that I'm not going to get into that right now, but those don't really fit in the search, as you can see. Sort of a bit of residue here, but you've got the search run 500 plus, and sorting it by ascending or descending really allows you to narrow down what it is you want to learn. Now, if you've been all the way through Mounts, you may be doing a different kind of search. I can't remember the Mounts, the number that Mounts takes you to, but I want to say it's like 50 or 100 or something like that. So in that case, you're going to go the other way, 100 minus, or 1 to 100. And your analysis window, if you keep it open, it will update with you. It will track with you whatever you're searching in the search tab here. So if this is the kind of search that you're doing, maybe you're tweaking it like, okay, that's good, but let me go a little higher, 150 and fewer. It will adjust in real time as you rerun the search. So you may as well keep that analysis window open. And there's more you can do with this. We will get into that as we go on, but at a basic level, this kind of search, I think, is a great way to figure out how to use your vocabulary. And then maybe it's as simple as Command A or Control A on Windows, right click, copy, and maybe just open up a text edit document and paste it all in there. And you can print that out, customize the font. Oh, that's going to be a lot to print. But maybe you did that list of 44 words. You can copy and paste that and print that out, turn it into vocabulary cards, whether you're doing that online with an app like Quizlet or the old-fashioned way, which is highly effective, writing it out and using flashcards. So you've got some great material now that you can draw on for the count search. Let me know if you have any questions about the count command, or especially if there's a particular way that you use it that you found helpful that I'm not sharing. But the definition is here, and it's really just simple. Finding words which only appear a certain number of times in the text being searched. And so we started with count 1, but you can also do it as a range. Let me show you as you think about whether you've got questions or comments on this, and then we'll wrap up in a bit. Let me show you one other thing that's important to know about the count command. We had talked about the context slider already, and how when you run a search, you can change how much context is showing. And so if we did, for example, let me get back to an English text here. We're searching the word love. I'm seeing verses out of context. I'm seeing exactly what I asked for, which is show me the word love everywhere it occurs, context slider set to 0. But that context slider, as we slide it further, adds a verse, then 2 verses, and then A for all context. So everything before and after. And then you can slide it back to 0 to go on to the next hit. So I might read Genesis 24 and then scroll it to A to do that, then get to the end of 24, scroll to Genesis 27, and so on. We need that context slider for this search too. And so if I am trying to learn vocabulary, for example, and this is kind of the reverse of what we did before, let's say I've learned all of the words that occur 101 times and more, or let's say that's my goal, or let's say I think I should have learned that many, whatever it is. You can also have your text show you the words that you don't yet know. So for that, COUNT, or again, you could have right-clicked, enter command, count, get it that way. I'm going to do words that occur 100 times and fewer. And now I'm going to hit enter. And this is going to show me words that I may not know in this scenario. They're going to be in bold and red. And maybe my approach now is, all right, I'm going to look at the instant details if it's a word that's a hit result. So biblos, well, that occurs 100 times or fewer. I haven't learned that, so I'm going to let myself look at that. Jesu Christu, I might not mouse over that because maybe I should just kind of figure that out. Again, this is not to be prescriptive, it's just an example. As you go through this, though, you're going to notice eventually that there will be verses that at least appear to be missing from your search. So if I skip ahead to John here, this looks a little funny. There's no John 1:6 showing here. We go right from John 1:5 to John 1:7, which does not make for fluid reading if my goal is to read through a portion of Scripture and have all the words occurring 100 times or fewer shown in bold and red. Same with John 1:10. This is simply because those verses don't match this condition. They don't have hits. They don't have words that occur 100 times or fewer. Now, for this, I'm going to just slide this all the way to A, because what I want in this scenario is to say read through John 1, and I want to know in bold and red any word that occurs 100 times or fewer, but I want to see all the text because I want to read all of it. And sure enough, here's John 1:6. Nothing is in bold and red because none of those words, not one of them occurs 100 times or fewer. They all occur 101 times or more, and that's good. If that's the vocabulary I know, I'm going to be really encouraged when I get to John 1:6 because I ought to be able to read it without help. Same with John 1:10. And you can even see here as you glance at this, I mean, this is not a whole lot of words in red and bold. It's certainly enough, but you know, the large majority of text that you're seeing here is black, which is to say it occurs 101 times or more, these words do. This is why people often recommend the Gospel of John as a starting point for reading Greek. For one thing, it's narrative, which tends to be easier than poetry or letters. But for another, you've just got a lot of frequently occurring vocabulary. And then for whatever you don't, you can use this count command. You could even adjust this to something like maybe as you get stronger in vocabulary, 50 times or fewer, and jump ahead to John and do your reading that way. So those are just some ways you might use the range command, the count command. We have only gone through 2 of these standalone commands, and there's more here to look at, but those are probably the ones that, well, those are definitely the ones that I use the most. I can't speak for all other users. I think in terms of what I see in forum activity and just different questions that come up in the webinars, those are the ones I think that people are asking about the most. But we certainly will spend some time looking at the other commands, these standalone commands, as we go on. So I'm going to stop there and we're going to use the last minute or two for questions and comments. Here's a great comment. Yeah, and I'm going to put this in the chat. Somebody says, I like to use compound count commands. For example, count 200 to 500 or count 2 through 7. Okay, excellent. And that's yeah, it's great. It's great to hear about kind of synthesizing these different commands. I think I mentioned last time, all of these commands that we're using, I mean, they all build on each other. There's certain ways to do it, and there's certain, you know, more complicated nested commands where Accordance will make sure you have the syntax right, and if you don't, you won't be able to run the search. But that's an interesting use case to take the count command like that. Oops, I copied the whole comment. Let's just run that here. Yep, and it ran just fine. And interestingly, by the way, I did not need to have that in all caps. And if you do, Accordance will tell you. You can always rest assured that the app, it will only run what it considers to be a legitimate search. So yeah, thanks for that comment. That's great. Yeah, here's another comment. We'll wrap up with this, and that did not go through. Let me try again. Somebody said, I have used count command to compare translations to see which ones translated a given Greek word with the fewest number of English words. Interesting. NIV tends to use more different words than ESV, for example. As you know, Greek words have multiple meanings, so English translation may need more than one word to communicate underlying meaning. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, you could, yeah, there's all kinds of fun stuff you could do. So that's a great comment, and thank you for that. Good. Well, feel free if you've got questions or comments, keep them coming. I can stay on for another minute or two. I am going to end the recording though. So if you are watching on the recording and would like this handout, again, you can email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com, and I'd be happy to share that with you. Of course, those of you here live are welcome to email me for any reason. You can reach me there.